going to get started off from Damascus, and Vanessa, welcome to the program. And you've got an update for us on the latest with respect to Iraq and Syria and, well, US aggression there. So,
of the 3rd of February, the US struck areas of Iraq and Syria on the border, basically, between Syria and Iraq. How the US is portraying the attack, of course, they're describing it as being in self-defense against the recent spate of attacks, more than 160 attacks by the Islamic resistance in Iraq against illegal US bases, both in Iraq and in Syria. So how is the US playing it? They're saying basically with US strikes in Iraq and Syria, Biden sends Iran a signal of deterrence and restraint. But this is very far from the truth. Let's have a look at the map of where the missiles struck. The US claimed over 85 targets and that they fired 125 missiles. You can see immediately that the majority of the targets are on the border, as I said, between Syria and Iraq. Interesting to point out that many of the areas that were hit were previously controlled by ISIS, of course, a US proxy in both Iraq and Syria. And we'll talk about the subsequent ISIS attacks immediately following the US aggression a little bit later in the report. So let's have a look at the claims by the US that Tower 22 was what was hit in northeast Jordan. That is palpably untrue, according to source reports that I've received, both military and intelligence from inside Syria. In reality, it was an area between the Al-Tanf illegal US base and Rukban refugee camp, as I've marked on the map, that was actually hit. So effectively, the US was trying to deflect from the fact that they were targeted as an illegitimate military base inside Syrian territory. So that's why they've basically portrayed it as an attack on a US outpost in Jordanian territory. 2 B-1 bombers were brought in from the US and launched the attack from Qatar, Jordan, Kuwait, and I believe there were 4 F-16s. The UK, according to Russia, took part in the attack. Iraq immediately denied Washington's claim that they had notified the Iraqi government prior to the overnight attack. And as a result of Jordan's role in the attack, Iraqi ministers in the Iraqi parliament have initiated a proposal, if we can just move, thank you, to halt subsidized oil exports to Jordan. There has basically been international outrage at the disproportionate aggression, which has achieved none of its aims because it didn't basically target the Islamic resistance at all. It targeted Syrian Arab Army positions and PMU, the Popular Mobilization Forces positions in Iraq. And they, of course, are integrated into the Iraqi military. So I just want to show a very quick clip of the attack on Al-Qaim, which is on the Iraqi border, which shows how the US basically was trying to carry out very much a shock and awe attack, which effectively targeted many civilians, over 40 killed in this attack. We can just say.
وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن لا إله.
As I said, the aggression was roundly condemned. Russia called an emergency meeting at the UN Security Council, which was yesterday, I think. It was on Monday. And this is what part of what Navencia said at the meeting, if we can roll this.
And this demonstrates once again to the entire world the aggressive nature of US policy in the Middle East and the full disregard of Washington for norms of international law. Participation in US attacks of the UK RAF should give no one the illusion that there is some sort of international coalition in place. London still has to respond for its zealous support of serious provocational attacks of its big brother in Washington, and also the ongoing attacks against Yemen. The actions of the Anglo-Saxons pose a direct threat to international peace and security. They undermine the world order based on the primacy of universal international law and the central role of the United Nations. Perhaps this kind of mob-like action is part of the so-called rules-based order.
И как недавно в своем интервью сказал бывший посол Австралии в Иране Джон Лендер, это, цитирую, набор постоянно меняющихся, постоянно колеблющихся правил, разработанных Соединенными Штатами в интересах Соединенных Штатов и их западных союзников. Конец цитаты. Добавив, что, цитирую, одна из самых сложных вещей в порядке, основанном на правилах, это выяснить, в чем заключаются эти правила. Конец цитаты. Поскольку
China also condemned the attack in very unequivocal terms. The United States claims that its actions were in response to the attacks on its military to safeguard its own security. Iraq and Syria have, however, already voiced strong condemnation. The US purports that it does not seek to create conflict in the Middle East. However, in reality, it does the opposite. History has repeatedly shown that military means is not the solution. He cautioned, noting that the actions by the United States will exacerbate the vicious cycle of violence in the Middle East. Underneath the rising tensions in the past few months is the failure, of course, to implement the ceasefire in Gaza. And we are now standing at a critical crossroad. At stake is the critical future of our world. And then the day before yesterday, I did an interview with Tehran University professor Syed Mohammad Morandi, also an expert on regional geopolitical affairs. And this is what he had to say. And bear in mind my comments about ISIS when you're listening to what he had to say about the attack.
Instead, was they attacked Syrian government positions, as you rightly pointed out. They attacked Iraqi government positions. The popular mobilization forces in Iraq are part of the Iraqi armed forces, and they led the fight against ISIS. And you rightly pointed out that as soon as the Americans carried out these attacks on Iraqi government positions and destroyed Iraqi government property, and killed Iraqi government-funded soldiers, ISIS carried out 4 attacks, which was definitely not a coincidence. In the case of Syria, the Americans did the same. They attacked bases that are well known, that are there to protect the public against ISIS militants that are trained by the Americans, and which in Al-Tanaf or other regions they're based. They go out, attack Syrian soldiers, and then they go back to those bases. And they never attack the Americans because they don't bite the hands that feed them. So what the Americans did basically was that instead of retaliating against those people who carried out the attack, they went and attacked those troops that are fighting ISIS. And then also, of course, the whole notion of retaliation is meaningless because U.S. occupation forces in Syria are not legitimate. Therefore, they have no right to attack, or retaliate. In Iraq, the parliament voted for the United States to leave. The U.S. armed forces refused to do so. So they have no right to attack or retaliate, as they call it. But of course, the United States is an empire.
And interestingly, because during our conversation, of course, we pointed out that what the US and the UK are doing is to defend the genocidal Zionist settler state of Israel that is committing genocide against Palestinians. on an hourly basis. Last night at around 12:30, Israel attacked Homs, the central area of Syria, from Tripoli in Lebanon, with more than 10 missiles. There were 7 dead, including a woman and child, and 13 injured in the attacks. And it's worth pointing out, it's around 100 kilometers where they targeted. We're not sure yet if it was a targeted assassination. It was definitely targeting Hezbollah and Syrian Arab Army military positions. But also, it's worth pointing out again the ISIS connection about 100 kilometers away. ISIS had recently carried out attacks against the hydrocarbon and oil fields to the east of Homs. I'm sure also a coincidence.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much for that, Vanessa. Now,